Hello, everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on Rash Pixel FM. I'm Pete Wright, and right over there is Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Pete Wright.
Hello, Nikki Kinzer. A happy and fine recording day to you.
You too. We're starting a new series today.
We are. We are starting a new series, and it is a series, it is a triggering series for me.
Yes.
Oh, Nikki Kinzer.
I'm sorry. But this will be good. This will be a good trigger.
It's cathartic. I've been planning for it all weekend. I've been, saying my little meditations. It's going to be okay, Pete. It's going to be okay. This is not about you.
This is not about you.
This is not about your lifelong struggle with this stuff. It's not about you.
Right.
So we're going to be talking about ADHD and money this whole month on the show. But we're starting this week. And before we do that, we want you to head over to TakeControlADHD.com. You can get to know us a little bit better. You can listen to the show right there on the website or subscribe to our mailing list. And we'll send you an email each time a new episode is released. You can connect with us on Twitter or Facebook at Take Control ADHD. And we extend our warmest of welcomes to Dawn and Jackson and Brooke and Susan and Emily and Carol, who all joined us in the ADHD community as patrons in the last week over at patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. Now, this show is and always will be free for all, but it does come at a cost for us to produce and to host and to grow this show. And thanks to all of the wonderful, wonderful people who lend their direct support through Patreon, the ADHD podcast can continue to thrive. If this show has ever touched you or helped you make a change in your life for the better, if you've ever found that you understand your relationship with ADHD in a new way, we encourage you to become a member at patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. It's listener-supported podcasting. With a few dollars a month, you can help guarantee that we continue to grow. Visit, once again, patreon.com/the ADHD podcast to learn more about our tiers of support. Thanks, everybody. Start talking about money and my tongue ties in knots.
Does it? Why?
Nikki.
Let's start with that.
Yeah, let's start with that. I have always had a complicated relationship with money in that either I think about it a lot or I don't think about it at all. And that leads in these massive pendulum swings and not a lot of stability. So the stability for me, thankfully, came when I got married and had someone else to be my sort of monetary accountability buddy, to just have somebody to talk about money and growth and stability in a way that didn't just cause crazy, disruption in my life and discomfort. But without that, like I'm sort of awash at sea. So. Mm-hmm. I'm eager. I know we have a set of fantastic guests coming up this month, and I'm eager to hear from them.
Yeah, me
because
too.
I know I have a lot to learn. I'm definitely in a mood of sort of provoked to learn this month.
It's interesting because we'll talk about this in just in a minute here about sort of how you view money and where that came from. And it really does start with how we grow up, right?
Sure.
But it's interesting. I've gone through waves in my life where I worried about it. I didn't worry about it. I was in debt. I guess that means that I didn't care enough about it.
Yeah, right.
And then I ended up marrying somebody who was actually very good with it. And I've learned a lot from him. So I'm at a point now where I'm actually very comfortable talking about money, and comfortable with it. But that is because, again, I married somebody too that's really good with money, and
really good with money.
I was really able to learn a lot and go from there. But yeah, so it's going to be good. We're going to have, it's going to be sort of a money series, right? So for the next 4 weeks, today we're going to start with an introduction, and I'm going to share with you some facts and stats around money and ADHD to give people a better understanding of what's going on and the challenges that they face, specifically around ADHD and money. Talk about your mindset with money, the relationship you have with money, and then breaking it down on what it means to work on your finances, because so many times I'll ask even like my groups, my coaching groups, I'll say, well, what do you guys want to talk about? What's important to you? Let's talk about money. But it's so big. Okay, which part of money do we talk about?
Right.
So really kind of figuring out how to break it down and setting reasonable goals of where to start. I'm really excited about having our experts on the show. In the next 3 weeks, we're going to be having Chelsea Brennan from smartmoneymamas.com. And we're also going to have Stephanie Sarkis, the author of ADD and Your Money, come on the show. And I am just really looking forward to having them really address more of the specific concerns where, you and I, Pete, can talk about it, but we're not coming from the expert view, right? And so I'm really excited about having them on the show.
Me too.
So much that some of the things that I'm going to say today actually come from the book ADD and Your Money from Stephanie Sarkis. So if you don't have that book, I highly recommend getting it. It's one of the only books out there that is specific to ADHD and money. So I think it's a good investment if this is something that you're struggling with.
Yeah, so let's dig into some of the facts. If we can sort of use this week as an opportunity to set the table, so to speak, for the conversations to come this month.
Yes. Well, so some of these statistics are actually probably not going to be surprising, but they're kind of depressing. So, just remember that we're going to be talking about strategies and help too. So it's not all bad. People with ADHD have a greater amount of debt. They have more difficulty paying their bills and less money saved up than people without ADHD. People with ADHD have lower incomes than those without ADHD, even when they have a similar education level. People with ADHD also miss more days of work due to unofficial absences. People with ADHD are more likely to take risks that lead to loss of money. And then additional research outside of the book that I found too is that people with ADHD are 2/3 more likely to be fired from jobs, 3 times more likely to impulsively quit their jobs, and 50% more likely to have changed jobs in a given period. These statistics clearly show us that there is a challenge around money. And if it's not recognized and managed, the consequences can certainly become very severe. A lot of resulting in broken relationships. Because if you notice, a lot of the stats around marriages and divorce is money, or money issues.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say, like, if you're 50% more likely to quit your job impulsively, what other relationships will you quit impulsively? Right.
Exactly. Yeah. High levels of debt and bankruptcy. And, this also, yes. What other relationships? Absolutely. Are you hiding what you're buying? Hiding purchases. I mean, I see some of that sometimes. The impulsive buying can be a huge issue. So hopefully we're going to, end up talking about a lot of that stuff with our experts too. But those are some of the stats.
Yeah.
Not great.
Grim. Not great. That's okay. It's all about building muscles. That's the whole point of this, is figure out what new muscles we have to build.
Right. And being aware of it is one of the, very first pieces of it. So what does ADHD have to do with this? Well, it really goes back, I think, to the basics of what executive functions are. Okay, because we have to look at how executive functions directly impact money management. And one of the executive functions that I'm going to highlight today that affect directly money management is, actually, there's a few: planning, organizing, working memory, and self-regulation. Mm-hmm. So those are major components that we have to really understand in order to understand how ADHD affects how you think of money.
If those sound familiar, it's also because they affect everything.
They affect everything. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we've talked a lot about planning in the last couple of weeks and how hard that is.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to do is just break this down a little bit and give everybody a little bit of an education if they're not real familiar with what executive functions are, how
Right.
these ones would relate to money. With planning, what happens is many ADDers have a difficult time thinking into the future, right? So they're looking at what's happening right now. They can't remember the past, and the future may be too overwhelming to really tackle. So designing a financial plan may seem like a good idea. You may have the intention of doing that, knowing that, hey, this sounds like something I should do. But there are so many roadblocks that can get in the way, because a financial plan, as I was mentioning earlier, is a very vague task. Not knowing where or how to start, can really stop someone from doing anything. And so they just continue to do what they're doing, whether that's hurting them or not. They don't even know, because they're not looking into it enough, right? So they also may be resisting the structure of a budget, because many ADDers do not want to be told what to do or how to do it. And so they avoid a budget altogether, because it just feels so constricting. And there's a little bit of, I think, denial sometimes, right? Like if I don't pay attention to it, it's not really there. And so we have to really kind of pay attention if we want to plan and look into, how our future is going to be impacted.
It's so funny to think about this, especially because we sort of called out that in our May workshop, that, and you asked me directly, how do I feel about structure, right? And
Right.
that structure in terms of time is incredibly helpful for me. And it actually helps me feel sort of liberated, that I know that my structure, I'm going to be taken care of because I have this structure in place. And so why is it that a budget, which is effectively the same sort of structure around money that I apply my schedule to time, why is it that a budget makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck? It makes me feel completely irrationally constrained and emotionally impacted.
Well, I would have to, just my own opinion on that is that a budget is basically, it's probably not what you want, right? So unless you make a lot of money and it doesn't matter how much you spend, which is the 1% of America or in the country, right?
Yeah.
Who wants that? Like, who wants to face that I can't, I have to make a choice between buying, a pair of shoes for myself versus a pair of shoes for my child. Like, of course, I remember, I think I've shared this story before on the show. I remember talking to my mom about parenting, and that was her example. She's like, when you need a new pair of shoes or your child needs a new pair of shoes, your child gets the shoes. And who wants to make that choice? I mean, we would rather, it'd be great to everybody have shoes.
Yeah.
Right?
Shoes for the world.
Shoes for the world.
Everybody gets shoes.
I think for me anyway, that's why I don't, I feel constricted by it, is that it's like, gosh, I'm having to face the fact that I can't have what everything that I want. I have to make choices. I have to. And when we don't, and I've done this before in my 20s, where then you get that credit card and you buy it anyway, and then all of a sudden you're in this debt, and that feels crappy too.
Yeah, it does.
Right. So
and so that's the thing that becomes triggering for me, is when we start talking about the same constraints that I'm totally comfortable with around my time and my days and projects. I am uncomfortable about with budgets, and this is my month to get over it. I need to get over myself, because I feel like I'm about 12 years old, right?
Well,
and I go into that
same
that same sort of childlike state where it's that spirit of entitlement. You can't tell me what to do with my money, but in fact you can, especially when it comes time to like building debt and having those debts called. And like, I've been through that road years ago, and it is not comfortable either.
It's not. And again, unless you have money just falling off of trees, we are limited by how much each of us have. So we have to live within that bucket. And that's hard, because living within your means is not an easy thing when your means aren't as much as you would like them to be.
That's right. Well, and especially when you add, I think you and I might be in a sort of a different context around that particular conversation around income, because we're not salaried, right? And we have some sort of predictive mechanism in what we do, but we are freelance, and that adds a whole new sense of unpredictability to to our financial flow.
Well, and there's other industries that are very similar too. When you think of anybody that works on any kind of commission, especially real estate,
commissions, service,
right?
tips.
Like if you're and real estate really just pops in my mind. I mean, you're getting that commission off of whatever houses or homes you sell, and if you're not selling homes, then you're not making as much money. Teachers, people who, yes, they're getting paid on a yearly basis, but they're still having some time in the summer that they could potentially have a second job if they wanted to or not. I mean, it's a funky way to get paid, right? It's different. So yeah, there's a lot of different things you have to think about. Well, and I think also you saying that, Pete, with like being a contractor or being like an entrepreneur, you really do have to plan, in the sense that if you have a really good like couple of months, you can't just expect that those good couple of months are going to follow. So you really do have to plan for that and not overspend or overdo it just because you had 2 really good months, because that 3rd or 4th month could really suck. And then now you need to go back and use those reserves. So it's a very much a balancing act. Now, organizing is one of those executive functions too that we've talked a lot about in the last few weeks, right? In all different contexts, space, time, and now we're going to talk about money.
Yeah.
This is definitely an issue with a lot of my clients is just keeping the finances straight. It's not that they don't have the money to pay for it. They can pay for it, but they forget to pay for it. Now, a lot of that can be taken away by doing automatic withdrawals and setting those bill paying systems up. So if you don't have that at this point, I still, you need to do that because it does make things a lot easier. But just in general, going back to just basic paper stuff too, organizing just doesn't come easily for somebody with ADHD. So most likely they've probably have tried different budgets. They've tried different apps. They've tried different systems before. Nothing's really stuck. Or they start putting something together, but they don't actually finish it to have it work. Right. So they start the process, but they don't really finish it. So when we look at organizing, it's all about decision making, and making decisions is not easy, especially when you have a lot of them to make. Even by just what app do you use? Right. What book do I look at and follow their program? Do I look at Susie Orman, or do I look at Dave Ramsey, or what do I do?
Right. Who do I trust? How do I figure out who to trust?
Yeah, it's really quite frustrating. And like we said, setting up a budget is not any more fun than having a budget and following it, but setting it up is not fun either. It's a lot of details. Working memory is probably something that you wouldn't necessarily think about as part of money management, but it really is, because, to understand how it works, working memory is basically that it's difficult to remember the consequences, the past consequences of something. And so even if it's really important to pay your bills, you may still forget to pay your bills because that working memory isn't working, right? You're not reminded. And so unless you have some reminders and some real solid systems in place to say, okay, every Sunday or every 1st and 15th, this is what we do, and you're reminded to do it, it's very easily to get, money is not necessarily going to be top of your mind. And if it is, you're going to probably want to do something else instead. R.A. Tuckman, one of our friends of the show, says, you can't remember what you don't pay attention to. And the more you are able to pay attention, the more likely you will remember. So we have to have those little triggers in place to help us remember that this is what you're paying attention to, is getting your finances in order. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that speaks directly to this whole idea of building a new muscle.
Right.
And setting new whatever your organizational structure looks like for your time, applying that to money. That's my big takeaway here is just, I need to put those daily tasks in, not just for doing my planks, but for updating the budget, or just at least thinking about, my financial health.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Self-regulation, probably not going to be a big surprise when it comes to especially impulsive purchases. But, self-regulation allows us to regulate our behavior. So when we are exercising good self-regulation, we're able to think before we speak. We can recall past events in order to predict the future. So when it's in place and we have this good sense of regulation, we're not making those impulsive purchases. We're actually saying, okay, I really want that new electronic, device, but I'm going to sit and I'm going to really think about it first before I just go and buy it because I want it. And so maybe, you're giving yourself that 24 hours to think about it. You're looking at, do I have the resources? In my case, when it comes to electronic devices, I just call Pete. And unfortunately, Pete will say, yes, get all of it.
I love spending other people's money.
You love spending other people's money.
I delight in it.
But what I think is the important point here is I trust you. And so I know that if I am considering buying something, you are going to give me the best advice, and you are going to tell me what's good and bad. And so I think that that's an important piece of self-regulation, is you're able to step back and say, okay, if I don't know everything that I should know about this, and we all know that's a rabbit hole of doing your own research, then, do find somebody that maybe does, so that you can make a better decision.
You know what I think is interesting about that whole sort of concept of finding somebody you trust. At least I know, like, when you call me, I tend to be much more sort of strategically frugal when I'm recommending something for you than when I'm buying it for myself. I could buy the same thing and I just irrationally upgrade every possible feature. If we're talking about a laptop, max it out.
Right.
I don't even need to think about it. But when I'm doing it for you, like, I tend to be much more sort of reasonable.
Right.
It's sort of conscious of what you need and what you use. So,
and that's because
like
how
that.
Not value necessarily. Well, it's value and view money. You just know that, right?
Yeah.
And you know that I have this husband. He's going to say, "No, you don't need that."
That's right. I feel like I'm preparing a defense for your husband. That's right. It's like I just have to make sure every single scenario is accounted for.
That's right. That's right.
Good.
And that actually leads into our next conversation, and that is your relationship with money. It's a really interesting dynamic. And we all have one. And I think I've probably have shared this story before when we've talked about money in past times, but it's really telling. I remember when I was first dating my husband, and he had gotten a bonus, end of year bonus from his sales job. And I was like, wow, that's fantastic. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to buy something? Like, what are you going to buy? Right. And he's like looking at me, he's like, well, I'm not going to buy anything. I'm just going to invest it. I'm like, you're going to invest all of it? Like, you're not even going to like go buy, like, at the time, like a CD, like back in the late 90s. But no, he's like, no, I'm just going to invest it. And we have two very completely different views on that. Now, he would still do that to this day. I still would take some of it and say, okay, I'm still going to reward some of it.
Treat yourself.
Yeah. Like I'm okay with, like, saving most of it, but then there's going to be some that's going to be for me too. So
what I find interesting about that, though, Nikki, is that the same joy and that you get out of taking some of it and treating yourself in some special way that's unique to you, he gets from investing it. Like, investing it is buying himself something that gives him joy. And I think that's really important to understand that mindset, because I also don't have it, right? If although I can say, once it's done, like, if somebody takes that money and I never have to see it or touch it, and it just goes into an investment, and then they start showing me the statements and returns, then I can get joy about it. But it's that immediate space, that interstitial space where I have to make a choice, that is very difficult for me. And that's why so many of my systems that work with regard to my money are automated systems that I don't have to touch. Like it's taken from me before I have to make a conscious choice about it.
Which is really smart. And that is a key strategy, I think, for all of us, but especially for ADHD, because then you don't see it. You don't think about it, right? Out of sight, out of mind. So it's gone. You don't have to make that choice whether or not you put it into a investment, an IRA, or you put it into, your pocket. So, And I think it's interesting too, because in the book, ADD and Your Money, the very first part, she talks about how our relationship with money is largely based on how we were raised. And there's this great exercise in the book, to kind of help you understand more about your beliefs, and just to share a couple of them. What's your earliest memory regarding money? Which of your parents' beliefs or attitudes about money do you still carry with you? And so, and then there's more like this in the book that really just gets you to think. And it's interesting because, I think about how I grew up, and I grew up in a very middle class. We weren't poor, but we weren't rich either. I mean, we had to make a lot of choices. And I remember my mom saying, they like to go on vacation. So for her, it was more important that they went on a vacation every year than to have a really nice fancy car. So they would have very, reasonable cars, used, but then they would go on 2-week vacations every year. Mm-hmm. So it was always like this choice, you always made these choices. So it's interesting just to kind of think about, okay, well, how did my parents spend money? I'm watching a show on Hulu, Little Fires Everywhere.
Oh, yes.
And it is interesting when you think about this, because it is really like one economic status that never has to worry about money, that has all of these options and resources. And then another economic status that are all, they're struggling and they don't have the same resources. And just to see how that plays out in the show is really interesting. Totally. So, just something to kind of think about is how you view it. And what do you think?
Well, I'm with you. And I was, the script that was written for me when I was, 5 to 15 it was one of privilege, right? I mean, I again, we weren't like super wealthy, but my dad was he was in television and ran a television station newsroom. And we had I never had to question the things that we needed. And I feel like we did not talk about it when I was a kid. In fact, we didn't start talking about money as a family until a significant investment challenge that my dad undertook. And we had to start making, they had to learn a lot about money and about their relationship with money as a result of losing a lot and quickly. And I feel like that was kind of a wake-up call for me too, to realize that I have no language to talk about money that was developed with me as a kid, apart from academic language, like going through, math, economics, accounting classes. And so I never really internalized those things. They were always sort of external to me. And that makes that even more of a challenge when, as an adult, I feel like I'm conditioned to a childlike relationship with that conversation. And so it's hard to embrace. It's hard to feel like I'm truly a part of it. And so as a result, it's also hard to consistently make smart decisions without guidance.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's an important point, that it's okay to have guidance.
Yeah.
Right? It's okay to have somebody help you with this, because it's not something that is always going to be natural, or that you're comfortable with your own beliefs, around it. And that leads me into speaking a little bit about what your beliefs are around money, right? So there's this relationship, but then there's also these limiting beliefs that can come up. And before digging into a financial kind of project, I think it is important that you identify what yours are. What do you say to yourself when you think about money? And if the first thing coming out of your mouth is, "Oh, I'm terrible with money. I can't ever stick to a budget. I never pay bills on time. They're always late." All of these things that we can easily say, then, we've got to really pick those things apart and, which ones are sabotaging you from moving forward. And what fears do you have? Because I think I have to go back to a little bit of that denial factor or ignorance is bliss. If I don't really know, then I don't have to face it. But, I don't know if that's really going to carry you through. I think that's more scary.
I think we could safely say it's not going to carry you
through. Yeah.
I don't think there's any question.
No, I'm more scared about that than just
about
facing
the uncertainty.
it. Yeah, and figuring out what you need to do. So,
right.
One of the things that I do with my clients, no matter what they're taking on, any kind of project or strategy or something that they want different in their life, I have them do a desire statement and have them write it out to what's important and then put it out or put it up somewhere so they can see it. And the desire statement is basically 3 different questions. It's just asking, what do I want? Why do I want it? And how do I want to feel? And we want to answer those questions in very just 2 to 3 type of words. We don't want to go into great detail because what we're trying to do is actually make a statement out of these 3 answers. And so if getting your finances is important, what do you want? Well, I want my finances to be in order. Why do you want that? To have freedom. How do I want to feel? Not stressed. Those are it can just be really simple things. But just keep that in front of you so that you don't forget why it's important to you. Because again, it's out of sight is out of mind and we need to pay attention to these things. So
right.
A desire statement can be really helpful. And then this last thing that I want to talk about, which I'm sure we're going to be talking more about with our experts, is just thinking about what your goals are. What is it that you want to do?
Yeah, and I think it's important to talk about this on 2 levels too, because there is one, and I speak personally. One is, what are your goals in assessing your financials and in your relationship with money? But 2, more practically, what are your goals with regard to this month? Like, we're going to go through this series of talking about money together, and how might you kind of make a set of immediate goals of how you want to talk about money as we go through June?
I love that. I think that's a great idea. It kind of puts it right in front of you right now, absolutely. And, it is such a big topic. And so zeroing in on what that means, is it to get out of debt? Is it to get out of a specific debt? I've had some people who, are really paying attention to get rid of those student loans. So is that something that you want to really concentrate on? Is it retirement? For you and I, Pete, it's paying for higher education for our kids. Is it an overall budget? And so, I think that we get in this mindset of, oh, we've got to attack it all. But we also know that when we attack something full force like that, it almost always falls apart and we stop doing it. And so I think it's important to talk to your financial advisor, talk to an accountant, listen to what our experts have to say, because this is just me going off of my own, thought process. And it will be really interesting. That'll be one of my questions, I think, for them is like, do you paint the picture for everything, or do you start small and just, only look at that specific debt? I'm not really sure. So it'll be really interesting to see what they have to say. But doing that self-analysis of zeroing in what it is that you want, what's been getting in your way. Is it because you don't have the right resources? You're not paying attention to it. You don't know what to do. What do you need, to help you? And then let's really kind of figure out what that first step is, which I'm sure our experts will help us with. But we have to break this down in some way, because
Truly.
It's just way, way too big to just go for it. Like, we're going to talk about financials.
Yeah, right.
What does that even mean?
It truly, and I feel like this is going to be a conversation that requires a certain amount of courage. So, muscle up. We can do it, right? We can do it. Like, this is a hard thing. It is hard for many people who don't live with any of the stresses that might come with ADHD. Your special blend of ADHD notwithstanding, money is hard.
It is.
And we live particularly, and I'll speak sort of geographically here. In the United States, we live in a particularly complex system of money, right? I was reading some posts from some friends who live in Sweden and Denmark, and their relationship with, healthcare, life insurance, those sorts of things, a lot of things that are just sort of taken care of. And he likened it to, it's a friend who actually married a woman and moved over to Denmark. His family's been there for 25 years. And he said, it's like, it's not like a social safety net like you would think about it. It's like being part of a frequent flyer club, and your level always starts at silver status. Like, it's just, you always get into the whatever you think about that. There is complexity that is saved by having a system like that we don't have.
Yeah.
And so I think that causes a lot of additional challenge and additional motivation to hide from the monetary systems that we have to address. Personal tax systems, retirement systems, these are things that we have to learn that are hard. We have to do hard things. Luckily, we can do hard things. We know we can do hard things.
Because we are in the growth mindset.
Because we're in the growth mindset. Check that out.
I know.
Check out the growth mindset on us.
Word by word, or word for word.
Right. So we'll do it. We'll do it. We'll do it. I know we can do it.
We can.
Oh, God. What am I doing?
You're going to do it. You're going to be okay. You're going to be just fine.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So let's do it. So next week, immediately, what are we doing?
That's a great question. I don't know that yet.
Okay.
I do know we are working on scheduling. And so our schedules for the people that do faithfully come to our live streams on Monday mornings. That is probably, it could change in the next 3 weeks because we are working on making the schedules work for our guests. Chelsea, the gal from what's it called?
Smart Money Mamas.
Yes. Smart Money Mamas is going to be doing a 2-part series, with us. And, I'm so excited to have Stephanie on the show too. And she's going to be coming back in the fall to talk about gaslighting, because she has a book about gaslighting too. So I'm so excited to have her as well. Both of these women are just going to be fantastic. So we are, as usual, going to kind of wing it a little bit. I know our audience appreciates that. And I'm sure that we will be talking about budgeting and impulse buying and what to avoid and what to do. And, if you have questions, certainly, send those to us, but send them to us quickly, because we are going to be, recording these shows. But I have a pretty good idea. And I think Pete and I, we can figure this out. We're going to, we're going to pick their brains.
We got this.
We got this.
We got it. We'll nail it. We can do hard things.
Yes, we can.
Thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show. We appreciate your time and your attention. On behalf of Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright. We'll catch you next week at some point right here on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.